In this video, I will discuss the strategic foot surveillance techniques every private investigator needs to know, as well as the foot surveillance mistakes every private investigator needs to avoid. Let's first talk about one of the biggest, most common places that a private investigator normally should never follow their subject into. That place is the convenience store, or any small store for that matter, like a cigarette shop, a vape shop, a liquor store, something like that. The big challenges in these smaller stores is that usually when your subject goes in, they know exactly what they're going to get. So they're going to get it, and then they're going to get out, and then they're going to get on their way. But when you follow them in, you have no idea what you are going to get. In fact, you probably won't want to get anything, because once they buy whatever they're buying, they are leaving. And now you need to run out of the store to catch up to them, to get in your car and to follow them. And nothing says, hey, look at me, I'm surveilling you, than you walking into a store and then just following your subject right out the moment they leave. But are there times that it would make sense to go into one of these small stores? One scenario might be if your subject went into a liquor store, but they were not supposed to be around liquor or consuming liquor or purchasing liquor. What I have done when I run into situations like this, I will go in behind them, grab something small right off the shelf and make my purchase. Then I might act like I'm just looking at other things in the store while I am observing my subject and getting video with my covert camera. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. But I would usually only do this if it is what I would call a larger small store, like a larger liquor store, if you will, not a small one with just a couple, 3 or 4 rows of stuff in it. As a general rule, it might suffice just to get the video of the subject walking in and then get the video of them walking out carrying whatever they purchased. Now, I had a case one time where the subject went into a liquor store. He wasn't supposed to purchase liquor. In fact, he had a restraining order against him in this domestic case, saying he could not consume, possess, or purchase liquor. When he came out, he was carrying 2 brown bags, so I had no idea what was really in those bags. What I did was I went into the liquor store right after he walked out, and I just started giggling to myself, but kind of out loud. Then I looked at the guy at the counter and I said something to the effect of, man, he looked like he was going to have a good time tonight. What is he having? I want 2 of them. The clerk then started laughing too, and he said, well, he just got 2 pints of Jack Daniels, and said something about it was going to be a wild party tonight. I then quickly reached into my back pocket and I said, oh man, I forgot my wallet. And then I walked out so I could get back in my car and try to follow the subject. Now, this is why I went into the store and did the pretext with the clerk. The liquor store was just a few blocks from where the subject lived, and he'd already gone to the grocery store and a fast food place and got some food, and then went to the liquor store. So I was pretty sure he was going to go home after that. In most cases, though, I wouldn't have done that. I would have just documented what I could document and put it in my report. And then if the attorney wanted to subpoena records at the liquor store, like their security video or something like that, or question the clerk, they could make that decision later. Grocery stores are probably one of the most common stores that a private investigator is going to follow their subject into. Now, depending on the type of case you're working and the evidence you need to obtain, it may or may not make sense to follow the subject into a grocery store. If you're working a workers' comp or a personal injury case or something like that, then you probably want to follow the subject into a grocery store. What you want to do is observe and hopefully get video if they are picking up any heavy items or anything like that. But if you're working a domestic case, let's say a cheating spouse investigation, it may not make sense to go into the grocery store unless you think they might be meeting somebody there or purchasing items for a later rendezvous. Now, here are some of the big mistakes that I have seen rookie and, dare I say, some veteran private investigators make when they do follow their subjects into grocery stores. The first is not grabbing a shopping cart or a shopping basket. You need to have one of these, and to me, having a shopping cart makes the most sense. But then having a shopping cart or a shopping basket and it's empty all of the time will make you stand out as well. So you need to make sure that you are shopping, or at least giving the impression that you are shopping too. Now, another huge mistake that a lot of PIs make is grabbing perishable items and putting them in their shopping cart. You have to keep in mind there's a high likelihood that you will have to abandon that shopping cart. Shopping. You have to keep in mind there is a high likelihood that you will have to abandon that shopping cart at some point. So for the sake of the grocery store business itself, it makes sense to not grab perishable items. I remember a case one time that I was working where another investigator and I had both gone into the grocery store. On our way out, I had taken things out of my shopping cart and then I just pushed the shopping cart over with the other empty shopping carts. But the other private investigator had his shopping cart. But the other private investigator had his shopping cart full of stuff, and some of that was perishable items like meat. He just kind of pushed it off to the side and started walking towards the front door. Then one of the clerks actually started yelling towards him to grab his basket and telling him, if you're going to leave, please put everything away. Now, thankfully, we didn't get burned on the case, but it did bring a lot of attention to that investigator. Not to mention, after he did get done putting things away where they belonged in the store, the subject had already walked out, gotten his car, and left. But thankfully, I was already in my car, and I was able to pick up the tail as soon as the subject left the parking lot. Another big mistake that private investigators make in grocery stores, or just about any kind of store really, is following their subject too closely. Unlike on the freeway, the subject is going to notice if that same person is always standing 10 feet behind them, staring toward them every time they stop to get something off the shelf. And another big mistake that happens a lot is when the subject does a double back or turns around in the middle of an aisle and ends up walking right past the investigator. We usually go with a general rule of you never want the subject to see your face more than 3 times. So if they did a double back or a turnaround and walked past you, they saw you once. Then if they see you in another aisle standing behind them, that's twice. So for me, that would be a good time to probably call the foot surveillance for the day and head back to my car and get ready to get video of the subject as they leave the store and make it so I could continue mobile surveillance once they leave. Another huge mistake that private investigators make at grocery stores is not positioning their vehicle for a strategic exit. Oftentimes, the PI is just in too big of a hurry to park and get into the store and get the video of their subject, and they don't think about the next tactical move that they may have to make. I always try to position my car to where when I get in it, I will be able to see the most likely exit points the subject will take, as well as the path from that exit point to their vehicle, and then when they leave, where I will be able to easily, without being noticed, get in behind them. Shopping malls have a plethora of their own challenges too when it comes to foot surveillance. Probably the biggest challenge, besides the sheer amount of space that's in a shopping mall, is the selection of stores that are in the mall. If I am following a female subject and she walks into a women's clothing store or a boutique store, I am going to look pretty weird just walking in there behind her by myself. And even if it isn't a boutique store or just a women's store, let's say it's a larger department store and it has men's stuff too. What about when she goes to a dressing room? Can I just go there and just hang out and wait for her to leave? Or if she goes to the shoe department, I am going to look pretty silly if I'm sitting there for an hour and a half not doing anything but looking at women's shoes waiting for her to figure out what she is or isn't going to buy. It kind of goes to say also, if she was to go into the perfume area or the jewelry department or something like that, I may not fit in so well just standing there watching her, and people are going to be asking me if I need help. So when I'm on foot surveillance, I'm not just being careful about not being made by my subject. I need to make sure that I'm not bringing attention to myself or making clerks in the store suspicious about me. And even if you don't follow them into the store, you have to be careful about just standing outside of the store waiting for them. Now, I often go shopping with my wife, and she'll go into one of her favorite stores, and I know she's going to be in there for 20, 30, or 40 minutes, and she's going to be trying on different clothing items, and I, quite frankly, am not really interested in following her around in the store all the time. Now, on occasion, I might go into the store with her if she asks me to go in because she wants to get my opinion about something, but usually I'll find a seat outside and I will just wait for her. And when that happens, oftentimes I think to myself, what if I was doing surveillance right then? If I was just sitting there for this long time, staring into the store, waiting to see my subject, what would people think? So if I was on surveillance, I would do the same thing that I would if I was with my wife. I would find a seat somewhere, probably not right in front of the store, but near the store, and I would grab my cell phone and I would probably be doing things on my cell phone, just like all the other guys sitting around waiting for their wives to get done shopping. But then what do you do when your subject walks out? How do you handle the continuation of foot surveillance? As a general rule for me, I will let them get a good distance away after they've walked out. Now, when I say a good distance, that might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 stores, depending on how busy the mall is. But I want to be careful in case she saw me. I don't want her to go into another store, and then when she walks out of that store, she sees me again sitting there on the bench in front of the store and then following her again. Another huge thing you need to keep in mind when you go into the mall is what entrance did the subject use. Most likely they're going to use that same entrance as their exit as well, but not always. You want to make sure that as you're walking through the mall, you want to take note of where other exits are and in what proximity are those exits to where the subject's vehicle is. A lot of malls these days have a lot of their merchandise shopping stores, like their clothing stores, electronic stores, things like that, on the inside, but their restaurants have exits on the outside. They do this for numerous reasons, but a lot of times it's because the restaurant might have longer hours. They might stay open later than the mall. So if your subject decides they need to grab a bite to eat, they may exit the mall through a door that they didn't necessarily enter the mall in, and then they'll enter into a restaurant to get something to eat. So what are you going to do with that? Are you going to go in and get something to eat too? Are you going to sit outside and wait for them? How are you going to handle that situation? This is always a tough one when your subject goes into any kind of an eating establishment. As a general rule for me, if they go into a regular fast food joint or just a regular quick sit down and eat place, I'm going to go in and I'm going to get something to eat as well. But what I'm going to get, I'm going to be able to get quickly, and I'm going to be able to consume it quickly, and I'm going to be able to get up and leave quickly if I need to. So it might literally be a milkshake and french fries, or french fries and a soda, or just a hamburger and a drink. Something small, something that will be able to be made very quick for me. Oftentimes, I will then eat and I will observe what the subject is doing while I'm eating. Then I may they exit the restaurant or the eating establishment, find a bench outside somewhere a little distance away where I can sit and I can watch for the subject to leave. So let's go over a few of the bigger foot surveillance mistakes that you as a private investigator really need to make sure you avoid. First is following too close. You just have to make sure that you are not always right behind them. But on the same hand, you also want to make sure that you're not following too far. You're not losing a line of sight of your subject. You might think if you go into a shopping mall or a big box store or something like that, it's easy to find the subject if you do lose them. But I am here to tell you, based on my experience, if you lose them, if they go into a store and you don't see them enter that store, it is not as easy to pick them up as you might think. You also want to make sure that you do not match the subject's pace exactly as they're walking through the store or the shopping mall or a park or whatever. If you are exactly 32 feet behind them all of the time and you're walking at the exact same speed they are all of the time, they may take notice of that too. I will oftentimes watch a subject go down one aisle, and then I will go down another 2 or 3 aisles, and then I'll go down, and then I'll come around back to see where they're at. Now, this has to be done strategically, and it's going to depend on how busy the store is, because making fancy maneuvers like this could ensure you do lose visual sight of the subject. Another thing you really want to avoid is repeatedly making eye contact with the subject. We already talked about the max limit of letting the subject see your face 3 times. But if you're always looking them directly in the eye every time you see them, sometimes this can be alarming for them, especially if they are suspicious in any way. And let's not forget about plans for if they enter an elevator, or they go into a stairwell, or if they park in a parking garage. You need to have plans in your mind of what you're going to do. Does it make sense for you to run up and get on the elevator with them? And you need to make sure that you are not displaying any visible reactions when the subject does sudden things, like if they suddenly stop or they suddenly turn around. This action by them may be an SDR, a surveillance detection route, or maybe they just forgot to grab something off the shelf behind them. But if you make some sudden major reactions when they do that, like you suddenly turn around and start looking the other way, walking the other way, looking like you are panicked, then that is going to display poorly to the subject. And probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see private investigators make while on surveillance is not adjusting their appearance. Did you follow the subject to a lake and they're out on the beach playing volleyball, but you're sitting there in your blue jeans and a long sleeve shirt underneath some shade tree watching them? Do you fit in? I always have my surveillance box of goodies with me when I'm out on surveillance. And that has several different types of clothing: hats, sunglasses, shirts, long sleeve shirts, short sleeve shirts, t-shirts, shorts themselves, different kinds of slacks, different shoes, flip-flops, so I can, if I need to, change my clothing to match wherever I am going when I'm on foot surveillance.